choice, kill or not kill, participate in the those police activities or not?
I think it ultimately was. We have to remember what they're being asked to do. And if someone thought that this was wrong, if someone thought this was a crime, indeed, one of the greatest crimes in human history, the psychological and emotional impetus to exempt himself from this would have been great. I mean, some of the descriptions in the book of what it was like to kill someone else are so hair-raising that some people have told me they have trouble reading them, which gives some indication of how much pressure there would have been upon these individuals not to do it if they'd actually been there. They weren't just reading these descriptions, they were creating the scenes which are described in the book. Often, I should add, by the men themselves. The book uses their own testimony. So the pressure would have been enormous to get out of it. So in this sense, I think it really was a simple choice. But more importantly, even if I would grant you that maybe it was more complicated, there are many other things the perpetrators did, which I detail in the book, which indicates that they were engaged, that they were assenting, that they were willing executioners. The cruelty which they perpetrated upon the victims, whether you believe that someone should be killed or not if you're given an order to do so, you don't have to torture the person, you don't have to beat the person, you don't have to mock the person first. And this was a constituent feature of the Holocaust. So this shows that they weren't merely executioners who somehow couldn't remove themselves from the killing because they were in these units, but that they liked what they did in some sense, that they believed it was right, that they were, as I said, engaged in what they were doing.
You object to the notion that critics, favorable or negative, those who offer criticisms of critical analyses of the book, that they become involved in extraneous matters. Would you consider it extraneous if I ask you, having done the researches, the massive researches that you have done, and your descriptions are harrowing, I can understand when you say there are those who have to put the book down because it becomes so overwhelming to think of human beings doing to other human beings what these ordinary Germans did. What are the implications, or what have the implications been in your own life, for your own thinking about Germany and Germans after 1945?
Oh, I do not consider this to be an extraneous question. Germany is a markedly changed country. Germany, as we know, has had an economic miracle, the Federal Republic of Germany I'm speaking of. It has also had a political cultural miracle as well. It's been the great success story of the post-war period. In the last 50 years, Germans have remade their society according to democratic values, have remade their political culture, and with generational replacement, with new generations being taught new universalistic values, essentially all people are created equal, instead of the previous values which divided the world into a hierarchy of races, differently abled and differently valued. We've seen a sea change in values and beliefs in Germany to the point where Germans today are by and large genuine Democrats and share the same general orientation and cultural ethos that others in Western countries do, with all the exceptions in Germany and exceptions elsewhere. And so Germany is, and I should add also that anti-Semitism has also declined enormously in Germany and been transformed in nature. There are few in Germany today who look upon Jews and see devils in human form instead of human beings.
What do you mean transformed in nature?
I mean that we only have one term, anti-Semitism, to describe an enormously wide range of complexes of beliefs about Jews. So the term anti-Semitism applies to those who harbor the garden variety stereotypes that we know from American culture, that Jews are stingy and they're clannish and this kind of thing. And the term also applies to someone like Hitler, who believed that the Jews needed to be exterminated. And so, while many Germans shared a Hitlerian image of Jews in the 30s and 40s, today, to the extent that Germans are anti-Semitic, they by and large share views that are more akin to the garden variety stereotypes that we know from American society.
You'll forgive me, but I find that such a strange position to take. First, you take me through these many hundreds of pages of documenting for me that ordinary Germans participated in enormous numbers, without being forced to, in the most horrendous, brutalizing extermination that we've experienced. And then what happened? 1945
was a caesura. And this is, I know, I
you
say...
can't do that to me.
No, but you should be happy that I can. This transformation is reflected, first of all, in the survey data. Surveys of German attitudes towards Jews in 1946 done by the American Occupation Authority show that they were rabidly anti-Semitic. And there have been consistent surveys done, and we have seen a demonstrable and decline in anti-Semitism. So the data reflect this. But the explanation, but it's not just the data that suggests this, but when you think about the ways in which people's values and beliefs are developed, young people's, you can see how this makes sense. The beliefs that Germans had about Jews were completely artificial. Jews are not human beings. Jews are responsible for all the evil in the world, etc., etc. What you read in Mein Kampf. Without social institutional support of the kind that existed in the 30s and before, it was very hard for Germans to maintain views that had no accord with reality, particularly when the whole world was saying to a conquered, pulverized, and occupied Germany, what you have done is the greatest evil in human history, and the beliefs that you had are evil. And so this was the beginning of a re-examination and a stripping away of these hallucinatory views about Jews.
But then you yourself are putting emphasis upon the support system for anti-Semitism that was Adolf Hitler and his cronies.
And that existed before Hitler ever came to power as well. I mean, as I show in the book, already in the 19th century, major German institutions put forward and propagated notions of Jews which were very similar to what the Nazis believed.
Well, you know, I think it was the Clive James piece in the New Yorker that led me. Suddenly, I had the feeling. I made a note here, just in the very first page of this criticism of your book, blaming the Germans, though he is. It's filled with high praise in many ways. I made a note to myself, he doesn't like what DJG discovers. He doesn't like it. He's made uncomfortable by what you say about pre-war Germans, ordinary Germans.
Ordinary Germans.
And I have this sense now that you don't want to feel that way about post-war ordinary Germans. Now, how could such a sea change take place, given the incredible exterministic...
It's very simple. Take a young German born in 1960, let's say, brought up in the Federal Republic of Germany, a democratic society, taught in an educational system which teaches democratic, universalistic values, part now of a Western, really part of a Western community that has a shared view of the Holocaust, of Jews, etc., and this person is brought up, never exposed to anti-Semitism in a public forum. You know, anti-Semitic utterances have been illegal in Germany since the founding of the Federal Republic. You cannot make an anti-Semitic statement in public. You can be prosecuted for it. Is it surprising that in such a transformed society with this educational system that young people in Germany would grow up without harboring the demonic views of Jews, which, as I said, had no accord with reality, but which were common in Germany before?
This is a wonderful statement, then, of the malleability of human nature.
No, that is, of course, true. I mean, some critics have said that I'm making an argument about German national character, or some critics have even said that I'm making a racist argument about Germans, a genetic, biological argument, which is nonsense. Anybody who reads the book will see that the argument is about political cultures, beliefs, and values, which can be transformed, not overnight, but gradually. 50 years is a long time. And so, yes, this is an optimistic development. And we should all note this, that we can remake ourselves individually and as communities and a society, the beliefs that we shared, which of course will inform very much how we act.
You know, when I was reading the book, I wondered, could Goldhagen really believe this? Could he be that much of a believer in the malleability of human nature, that you can mold it, shape it? You say 50 years is a long time. You know that 50 years is not a long time.
It is and it isn't. From our own history, we know things. Look at the American South.
Yes, I was thinking of
the American South. In 1950, the vast majority of whites in the American South believed that segregation was right, natural, important, necessary. I doubt, you may disagree, I doubt that whatever the beliefs